Welcome to the sixth in a series of Zoom calls that is part of the Alum to Alum series. The name of this session is the GSB Leading in a Pandemic and Finding New Ways to Play. And when we took on this topic, we realized that the whole concept of play and gathering together in crowds is a huge, huge subject. And we decided to narrow on this particular slice of that topic. And Paraag will be with us from the San Francisco 49ers. Nathan comes with just a wealth of live entertainment experience, from being CEO of Ticketmaster to a recent company that he co-founded, Rival. And then Michael is starting a brand new startup, and we're going to hear more about that. So anyway, we're really excited to hear our fellow GSB alums just talk about this. And we also realize that this session is coming in a very interesting time in the whole series, especially given what's going on in the country. And I wanted to let you know that just yesterday, we had a huge meeting of alumni and students who are coming together to combine our efforts in creating initiatives that are both going to be short-term in focus as well as longer-term in focus at the GSB. The purpose of the series overall is to inspire positive action related to the pandemic. We felt that we were certain, as the pandemic really hit the world, that GSB alums were really coming forward in their respective disciplines and making an impact as leaders. And we wanted to have an opportunity to just showcase in a very, very comprehensive way what that was all about. Our additional purpose was to build community between alumni and students in the GSB, as well as welcome admits and other guests that would be interested in just joining us in this experience. Ultimately, we want to bring hope and optimism to all as we grapple with this unprecedented challenge for the world. So with no further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Paraag, who is president of the San Francisco 49ers, a professional football team that is a generational experience for me and my family. So Paraag.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining. Can I just first say that slide that you had of the GSB campus makes all of us previous to class of 2012 very jealous. So Melanie, I know you're joining in 22. Like, you have a pretty awesome campus you get to come to. We were in the equivalent of RVs and sheds, so it's pretty beautiful that what you guys have now. But no, thank you everybody. I think this is I just had a staff Zoom the other day talking about this, but we are in a very interesting time in sport. And I feel like we're in a giant fishbowl right now. Sports is a giant fishbowl. You see any type of sports that were on over the last 3 months got such great viewership and eyeballs because everybody needs something to be excited about and something to watch. And I feel like with the return of professional sports and all sports, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, soccer, anything, there's just so much focus on it. And I'd like to talk about the fishbowl now, particularly because of two things. One is, obviously, we all need a distraction from everything going on with COVID, and probably for everybody to have some level of comfort or discomfort, but some level of comfort in knowing that large gatherings or gatherings of people is okay and can be done. And who knows in what capacity or how many people, but that's something that everybody's looking at the fishbowl of sports to see if it's possible. And now in the last few weeks, there's a whole new fishbowl, and that is with everything going on with race relations and tensions in the US and around the world, really. And sports is really a fishbowl for that. It's no secret, and when you look at the disparity in professional sports between athletes and front offices, or athletes and coaching staffs and things like that, and how we handle it, and I'll just speak to the NFL, how we handle it, how we address it, how we are okay with people voicing their opinions and supporting their own causes, even relative to how we were at the 49ers or within the NFL 5 years ago. There's a big fishbowl, and people are going to be looking at us, and hopefully, in both respects, but particularly around everything around racial tensions right now. I hope that we sort of provide a symbol or a path for how we can make things better.
Paraag, when we met to prepare for this session, you also spoke about the course that you teach at the GSB right now in negotiation and your final experience in your class. And I know a lot of alums are wondering just, how are the students doing? And especially in light of these events in the recent weeks, just kind of what's campus like? So could you give us a little window into that class that you taught?
Yeah, certainly. So I teach a negotiation dynamics class with George Foster and Sam Hinkie in the spring quarter at the GSB, and we just finished our last class, and it was pretty neat. I got to tell you, I was honestly a little bit skeptical of how these Zoom classes would go, particularly when you have a course that you bring in a lot of different speakers whose the gravitas of their actual physical presence is what really helps sort of energize the class. And so not having that, I was very skeptical of how it would go. And I was very pleasantly surprised, not just in the level of engagement and questions and things like that, but I feel like we were all sort of dialed in, and everybody was recognizing the circumstances we were in, and it went off pretty smoothly. And some of the speakers that we had in near the second half of this was, or at least near the last few courses, was after some of the incidents that had happened around this country, and it really escalated our conversation to just we had to go off record a few times just because we were having some very open, honest, and direct conversations around race relations.
And you said, I remember that you described that very last class session as a very poignant and also in many ways unifying experience for those that were in the classroom at the time, just sharing the experience with everyone. And I know that was a question that some of the students have asked me, have commented even in our meeting yesterday, is we want to make it okay for people to be able to talk about this in an open and productive way. And the fact that that last class did that, I think is a testimony to those who were involved.
Yeah, it was really neat. I mean, look, I even in the last class, we took questions from everybody. And, a few of the students had questions for me about Colin Kaepernick. And because we were off record and because we were in the confines of the GSB, we had a very frank, honest conversation about everything, and a good dialogue back and forth between myself and the students. And it was very productive and almost cathartic in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Great. Could you talk about when did you first realize that you would, well, actually, with the cancellation of professional MLB, the Major League Baseball, but when we spoke, you also said that right now, because your season comes after all the others, that you're preparing plans to go forward with your season. Could you talk about just all of the different scenarios that you assessed and the plans that you have for the season?
Yeah, so we're in a fortunate position in that in football, we haven't lost any revenue, so to speak, just yet, because all of this started right after, unfortunately, we lost the Super Bowl, is when all of this really started. So we were in the smack dab in the beginning of our off season. And so, in a normal year, we wouldn't start our training camp until July, and preseason and regular season in August and September. So we really haven't gotten to the point where games are in jeopardy just yet. And so in football, we have the benefit of watching everybody else, whether it's soccer, European football, basketball, hockey, and if baseball gets started, all of those, and we get to see how they do it and the protocols and practices that they put in place. And honestly, we'll get to cherry pick some of the best practices from each of the leagues and be able to implement those within what we're going to have in terms of protocols. And so we've had a lot of back and forth dialogue on that. You know, the other thing I'll say is it's not just in terms of protocols on health and safety, but it's actually also some of the best practices around the negotiations with the players' unions within each respective sport. Some of the sports, they haven't their season is in jeopardy because they haven't yet been able to negotiate sort of a new salary structure for a truncated season. And if they're not able to do that, all of the health protocols don't matter because they won't be able to play. And so we're also able to sort of watch that and take some of the best practices from there before we get started. At the end of the day, these are just plans, right? These are just ideas and plans because we still don't know what will happen if 2 days before a game, our starting quarterback and our entire offensive line test positive. We don't know what those next steps are going to be. We don't know what happens if there's a massive second wave right in the middle of our football season and what we're going to do. So right now, these are just plans, but as we all know, best laid plans get put to waste sometimes as well. But we at least have the benefit of watching everybody else. We're involved. We are owners of a football team in the UK, and actually soccer here, but that soccer team is starting. Their first game is June 21st, and there's a lot of protocols that we've helped put in place there. And we're going to see starting next week how that plays out. They're playing without any fans in the UK, and so they're, in fact, in the season ticket holder has the option. They can either get a refund on their season ticket, or they can get three things. They can get a free stream of the game, they can get a program, and they can get a life-size cardboard cutout of themselves, and we throw it in the seat. And amazingly, the European football fans love their football because it's like 80 or 90% of them have elected to have that. So it's going to be pretty interesting to watch next week.
Yeah, it's really another piece of the puzzle, which is how do you protect the fan experience, keep that loyalty, and keep the fun factor, frankly. I mean, you know, and how can people still share that experience of athletics, which for some of us is a huge part of our you know, the piece of our fun pie. And so I think that I'm eager to see how that all unfolds in this season. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was listening to Sports Talk Radio the other day, and collegiate football, because it covers all of the United States, and each state by state is having different rules and protocols associated with large crowd gatherings. There's a whole different scenario playing out at the collegiate level. And there's also a huge impact on the collegiate athlete, and that whole I think, system that really does provide opportunity for many young people and young people of color who need that. So
yeah, and I've got a lot of feelings about that. I won't share too many of them, but there is an interesting tension going on right now. If college campuses are not going to be open, and yet there's this immense pressure for college football athletes to come and play for their respective schools, even though none of the rest of the undergrad are going to be on campus. That's going to be a very interesting one. I mean, it's different in professional sports because the athletes are employees; they're paid employees, mm-hmm. And you know, we're talking about student athletes who are not getting paid,
right,
putting themselves on the line, and there's a lot of risk at stake. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yep. Yeah, it's a huge issue right now that's being addressed by each university and college. So, yeah. Okay, should we go to Michael? And Michael, your perspective coming from, or I'm sorry, Nathan. We were going to do Nathan second. Excuse me, Michael. I saw that look on your face like, what? Okay, it's Nathan.
All right. Paraag and I are the opening act for Michael.
Yeah, that's right. So Nathan, you have a very diverse background across large crowd live entertainment of different kinds. Could you just give us your perspective about how the industry, all the different voices, the different stakeholders that came to bear on this situation as the pandemic unfolded.
Yeah, sure. And just as a segue to what we were just talking about in sports, so I have a brother who's on the PGA Tour, and golf is actually surprisingly going to be a pretty interesting litmus test for what it means to come back. They're definitely going to be the first sport that brings fans back. I think there's probably going to be about 8,000 fans at the Memorial Tournament in July in Ohio. And, that on the surface, depending on, where you get your science, but I think there's general consensus that being, outside and fairly spread out, across multiple acres on a course, again, in the sunlight, is about the safest place you can be. And so golf, surprisingly, is going to be a very, very interesting test of what it's like to bring fans back, how you actually do that. And, by August, you'll have a pretty good sense for whether it's working and whether there's any accelerating of cases through the course of bringing those people back. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the live event space more generally, and in particular the concert business, which is one that is near and dear to my heart that I've spent a lot of time in. I mean, I think Paraag laid out a whole bunch of considerations that they're going through to basically say, can we come back and play? And the reason for that, above all else, is that they've got an income stream through the media rights, right? That for some at least can be revenue positive. The concert business doesn't have that, at least not today. Michael may be trying to set that up, and we'll hear more from him in a second. But the concert business, there's just more risk, right? When you look in hindsight, Madonna had to cancel a bunch of shows in France and the back part of her tour at the very beginning of this year because she thought she had the flu. Well, it turned out she had COVID. And there was a whole bunch of loss that was taken in that moment. And if you think about concerts in general, they're all generally inside, not including the summer festival season, but you've got a lot of people inside. You have people even more clustered than they are at sporting events when you think about the GA pits and floor seating and in arenas and those kinds of things, and the general sort of cramming of people into smaller clubs. So you've got a lot more risk there. But then, Paraag just said, hey, we're going to have to accept the reality that one of our players probably will test positive. The good news there is usually there's somebody who can step in to take that athlete's place. There's nobody who can step in to play Taylor Swift the next night. There's no understudy for Taylor Swift. And so there's a lot more risk to the overall show that's baked in right now. And for that reason, I think you're seeing the whole industry be particularly conservative about restarting at this point. There's a lot of rumors right now around Coachella. Coachella's not happening this year. There's no chance that they're going to put 90,000 people, potentially at the peak of a second wave in a field, in the Indio Valley. So I think a lot of the forces in the industry, and in particular, it's the artists who are saying, what's really in it for me? I need this. This is artists are now making 90% of their income from the road. I need this to fund my lifestyle and this is how I make a living, but I don't need it so badly that I would put myself out there, put an entire tour up. By the way, you assume a bunch of costs once you get that tour going, you sign up a bunch of people to work, you make a bunch of commitments, then you get sick yourself as an artist, and you really eat a whole lot of cost. So broadly speaking, I think the industry is really setting up for a 2021 return. And the particular business dynamics of the industry, as many of you probably frustratingly know, is that the artists who you love generally put their tickets on sale even as far out as a year in advance of their shows. And they do that because they capitalize on a bunch of pent-up demand. Usually in these situations, supply is way less than demand, right? Demand far outstrips supply because an artist can only play so many concerts in so many places. And so they capitalize on that by basically getting a float from the fans, right? They'll go up and sometimes collect as much as $100 million for events that aren't going to happen for a year. And the entire industry has actually worked off of that cash flow for a very long time, from artists to promoters, all the way down to scalpers and the broker community, which, you know, sells a bunch of tickets, they take their cash. Historically, the secondary marketplaces like StubHub have paid them out when fans have bought those tickets from the brokers. Then the broker goes and buys more inventory and posts it and sort of continue. Well, that whole pyramid has come tumbling down over the past few months. And there is an absolute culling of the industry going on, and the sort of cottage businesses that are built on top of the concert business. And some of the largest players, the promoters like Live Nation and AEG, certainly have enough cash to survive, frankly, all the way through the end of 2021. And so they can sort of sit and wait. But so many of the smaller players, and by the way, that includes a lot of artists who have a team of sometimes 100 people or more who are part of their operation, they're part of their touring operation, who are stuck right now. And that includes, by the way, a lot of you know, mom and pop brokers who have gone belly up, and so you're going to see a lot of interesting consolidation in this business. It also potentially leaves a soft spot of vulnerability for potential new entrants who are highly capitalized to come in and think about different parts of the value chain. Can I assume inventory risk from artists? Are there other ways for me to support artists? Are there new ways for me to distribute the live event? Again, we'll hear from Michael in a bit, but right now, you know, it doesn't really work to support an artist, at least today, their lifestyle, unless you're there in person, right? There's something about being at a live event that you know, we're just sort of chemically wired to be there. And so in the absence of that, the industry certainly takes a really big hit. And I think, interestingly, a lot of the things that frustrate the consumer, frustrate the fan about the live event going experience, particularly as it relates to concerts, are driven by this float period that encourages brokers to come in, the weird supply and demand dynamics of the industry. I think one of the upsides of this crisis for the industry in the long run is that it's going to force some cleaning up of the shadiness around the edges of the business that have really, like I said, frustrated consumers for a long time. For example, I think you're going to see marketplaces like StubHub really start to crack down on bad actors who sell tickets that they don't have, or you know, don't deliver the consumer experience that is seamless. And so in those places where a lot of fans have had trouble around the edges of the secondary market, I think you're going to start to see some cleanup there. And then, so the last thing I would just say is you know, there's some really interesting longer term plays in the business, some longer term questions coming out of the industry at the moment. I mean, the first is, hey, are we going to have a longer term demand question? Like, we've got a consumer recession for sure. How long will we be in it? We've had 10 years of rising ticket prices, sort of unfettered demand that artists have just gone out and you know, in some cases 10x'd their earnings from the road. Will we see some demand questions, and how will that affect the ways in which artists begin to price their product? Because one of the things we're seeing through this crisis economically is sort of the exacerbation of economic inequality. You were already starting to see that in the concert business, super high-end, multi-$1,000 for one night experiences where maybe you even get to meet the artist. And then on the other end, you know, nosebleed seats way up in the top of Paraag Stadium, you know, that we're selling historically for $40. Well, we'll see how, it's going to be very interesting to see how the artists manage coming out of the you know, presuming that we've got a bunch of tickets on sale in 2021, that we've got you know, some demand at the high end that holds, but then, you know, a large part of the bread and butter consumer base that can't quite afford the ticket prices that they did before. On top of that, you've got now almost a year and a half, maybe 2 years of pent-up supply. Artists who were going to go out, who didn't. Well, the interesting question now is, who puts their tickets on sale first? Because when you've got Taylor Swift and Harry Styles and, you know, Kendrick Lamar and all of whom are like, okay, now it's time for me to go make my money. Who's going to put their tickets on sale first? Do you have a glut of supply? And by the way, when you layer in all of the sports that are going to happen this fall in our country, suddenly consumers at a time where their dollars are cut back are going to have some interesting and tough choices for what to do with their money, because you know, a consumer might buy 12 events over 12 months. They're not going to buy 12 events within 1 month. And so that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch and see how that happens. And then the last point is just with the decision that the NBA just made, and that you assume the NHL is going to follow suit on, they've shifted their schedule. And the reason that matters is these NBA teams play in the arenas where some of the biggest concerts in the world happen. And historically, the summer was a time when those arenas were dark because the leagues are in the off season. And so concerts would play a lot of arena dates in the summer. Well, that's going to change now as the NBA shifts their schedule to be sort of more of a December to August, ostensibly to not compete as much with football. And so it may actually shift the concert calendar in ways that we're only starting to really understand. So lots of interesting dynamics. Certainly been a really difficult time for the industry as a whole because the revenue's gone to absolute zero. And there really isn't a great replacement today for the live event. But I do think that coming out of it, we're going to see some cleaning up of the industry in a lot of ways, and some better practices for consumers. Just as it's going to be very interesting to see the pecking order in which artists come back and start reclaiming those consumer dollars, all while in the midst of a consumer recession.
The other point that you made when we spoke prior to this session was that a lot of the policies about social distancing and the cleaning protocols and all that are really handled by the large venues themselves. That the artist may have an opinion about that, or even, you know, local ordinances or whatever, but it's the venue that is the ultimate decider and provider of the social distancing protocols that may be implemented. Do you have any insight about that, and any comment about what's being done to also address the diluted fan experience, if you will?
Yeah, I think here's the truth. The artist is really the final arbiter of all these things. And so within the state guidelines, just as, you know, I'm sure Paraag would say, the NFL on a team by team basis will adhere to whatever the state guidelines are. In this case, the artist actually does have sort of final say over how that experience happens within the venue. And then it's the venue's job to go and execute that. That said, it's really hard to socially distance at a concert. Like, it just is. There's only so many means of, and when you get, you know, the reduced capacity concert idea just really drains the energy out of a moment. You know, people go, it's a super social experience. There isn't as much danger and drama and action at a concert as there is at a football game, right? And so the concert going experience is a little bit inherently more social. So it's going to be very, very difficult for them to execute on that. They've tried in a couple of ways. You've seen some cute ideas. The drive-in concert idea where you're in your car. There was an idea that I think in Arkansas that somebody was going to do a concert at reduced capacity. And I think we'll see some of those things experimented. The problem is the economics don't work particularly well there. They just don't, right? You can't have Coachella with 20,000 people because you got to pay this broad suite of artists to go play. And it just doesn't, the economics of that don't work. And so I think, you know, the artist will ultimately dictate what those social, you know, distancing guidelines are. The venue's job is to execute on it, but it's hard to do at a concert. It just is, for what the inherent experience is like.
And that may be the perfect segue to Michael. Michael, could you talk about the idea that you and your co-founders have? And also, when we talked prior to this session, this is your 7th startup. Am I correct? And
that is right. 7.
Even just positioning this for the benefit of the alums, especially the admits, the students who are currently there. Please talk about, first of all, your entrepreneurial experience, and then go into your current startup.
Sure. So this is my 7th startup, my 3rd software company, and I've had 4 nonprofits that I also started over, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years. This one I'm starting with a classmate, Andy Drexler, who you can see in a field of sunflowers waving. So Andy and I go back, well, to 1985, actually, 1983. And, you know, he was involved with software and has more of the technical skills, and I've principally worked in operations and marketing and so on. So, you know, it's always fun to start a new company. It's always fun to take an idea and trying to figure out how to make it real. You know, I'd say out of the 7 that I've been, well, the 6 that I know that have been successful, this one I hope is going to be successful. There's also the ones I won't talk about, the ones that kind of crashed and burned along the way. So a number of those. This is my first consumer company. So all the others, the other software companies have been B2B, you know, more you know, directly in the business space. And so for me, this is a really steep learning curve, I think for Andy as well. And I suspect we're going to learn more from some of the people on this panel than you know we have to actually give. So I'll tell you, the company itself really tries to leverage what has happened with sheltering in place. So we are a new web service. Find Me a Stream is a new web service that is focused on putting together people who are sheltering in place with people that are involved in promoting or hosting live events. So for example, a musician, a yoga instructor, somebody doing exercise classes, those people are creators. They're creating content. And historically, they've done that live with an audience that's there. They can't do that any longer. So we know there's a whole range of people that are interested in the things that they're creating: music, exercise, sports, entertainment, public affairs. So that's what we're trying to do, is find ways to bring those 2 sets of people together. The application is, you know, in the early stages. We're about a month into it. But the features of it in sort of technical terms, it's user-generated content. So the people that are entering information into our application are the people that are producing these events, whatever those events are. We're bringing it together in an aggregated directory. So we aren't actually hosting any of the content. We're compiling and bringing that together. We're curating it. So we have a means of actually moderating content, rating content, providing ways for people to comment on content, not unlike what you would see, say, with Yelp for various services. We want to do this globally. That's an aspiration right now. You know, really, we just have kind of a US-based system with really a focus just on the Bay Area and the West Coast. And the application is also embeddable, which means that you can take what we built and put it into another application to become an events calendar and directory that is customized by geography and topic. So that's sort of the overview of what it is. It's pretty, you know, self-explanatory when you go to see it. I use 2 analogies to describe it. We are the Craigslist for live events. So if you think about Craigslist bringing buyers and sellers together, we're trying to bring together people that are creating events with people that want to engage in the excitement of something that's live and also participate in that. The second analogy I use is TV Guide, and that really dates me. But you know, TV Guide was something that once existed, and you could see, you know, all the range of television programs that were taking place across broadcast networks. We're trying to do the same thing, but for live stream programs. As I mentioned, we're super early stage. We launched about a month ago. I'd say we're still, you know, proof of concept, collecting information, getting some data, trying to really find that sweet spot where the demand from both the creators and the people that are browsing content exists. We've got 3, probably 5 interns that are working with us. I'm interviewing a couple today, entirely self-funded. Andy and I are writing the checks so far, which we are very fortunate to be able to do. So that's kind of the background. And then one of the other things that you and I talked about is kind of where did this idea come from? And, really the observation is that we're transitioning to some kind of a new normal where you're going to have live events with some diminished audience and then the opportunity for virtual events. And right now there is not a central location for those virtual events. Actually, there were 2 things at Stanford that really sort of triggered our thinking. Back in March, my wife participated in a conference on climate change. She's the chief scientist for World Wildlife Fund, and there was an event with the Woods Institute. And the event was originally going to be a live event with about 120 people in DC with a national press conference. And they had to, cancel the event, cancel the live event, and they went virtual. And they expected, 120 people to show up, and they ended up with 680 registered, 500 people showed up. There was no publicity, and in the midst of that, I was surprised that I didn't even know the event was going on. So that to me was like, okay, that's a big opportunity, and I had no idea. About a week later, Stanford hosted this event on COVID and AI. And again, it was going to be a live event, not on COVID, but on neuroscience and AI. And kind of at the last minute, Stanford switched their topic. And they had 800 people originally registered for the live event. And they had to cancel it, make it virtual. And when they launched it, I think they had 32,000 people that signed in from around the world. So 400 X the number of people that they originally planned. So again, to me, that signaled, hey, there's something here that's going on with live streaming, live events. People still want to be participating in something that's taking place real time, like this, like we're doing right now. And so that was the sort of the catalyst that led Andy and I to think, hey, let's try to create this platform that brings creators and browsers together. So,
and you're obviously in contrast to what Nathan was just talking about, the Taylor Swifts, the mega artists and mega events. You're catering to content, artists, and experiences that are different from these large venue, huge crowds experience, right? Could you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of artists, a lot of yoga instructors, a lot of exercise people that are out of work, and they may, teach to 10 or 20 people historically, or maybe they're, a mid-tier performer that would play a place that had 300-400 people. Well, you can, over Zoom, you can get quite a few people engaged. Obviously it's not the same thing as being live and there, but it is a way, if you're a performer, to continue to perform, or a teacher to continue to teach. So, and there's a big market there. I mean, there are a lot of unemployed or underemployed people running classes or doing events. And, we've seen a lot of, in the last couple of weeks, my wife starts sending me these science events. There's a dozen live science events every day. There's Mark Zitter and who's one of our classmates, and public affairs with the Commonwealth Club. There is a wealth of things that are going on that we just don't even know about. And, again, we're trying to identify those things and bring them to people that are looking for new experiences.
And could you comment really quickly on the business model? Because I think, aggregating content the way you are, and then, pushing it out to users, you know, again, it's different than this large concert venue and all that. What's your business model?
Can I defer to Andy on that one? No, just
Sure.
kidding. Just kidding. No, no.
Oh, okay.
So the business model initially is advertising. So we're going to be incorporating, you know, banner ads and different kinds of ads into the platform, so that, you know, we get paid as people come and are attracted there. Eventually, I think we want to do more with sponsored ads, sponsored events. You know, have different ways. Again, you know, you can see this model with whether it's with Yelp or Google, where they'll, you know, people will pay to have their event at the top of the list. So, you know, I think that that's the second piece. A third potential piece would be to partner with folks that are actually monetizing tickets and ticketing. I mean, that isn't something we have any real expertise in, but I think it's certainly an opportunity for us to work with people that are doing those sorts of things. You know, there are, again, you know, we've got, I think, probably 10 channels. So within each of those channels, there are different opportunities, I think, income opportunities. So, but right now, you know, we're just trying to figure out where the supply and demand are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, I'd like to propose now that we open it up to questions. Let's see. Question for Michael. Would a subscription model work for Find Me a Stream?
You know, interestingly, I think it would. We've talked about a, you know, sort of a freemium model where, you know, you could get a certain amount of streams for free and then, you know, pay for others. The challenge, of course, we have is we're a directory and a calendar. So we aren't actually running, you know, we aren't hosting the live stream. So we would need to figure out how to bridge that. You know, I think being this early stage, we are really sort of thinking through, you know, a lot of those business questions. And there, I mean, part of the fun of a startup is that stuff is, we don't know it, and it's really interesting to try and figure it out. So.
And so you're also playing with Greg Hollander had a question about once shelter in place is lifted and some of the events that Nathan was talking about begin to resume. Do you anticipate a big impact to your idea, or is it going to be still attractive to those people who say, I couldn't fly to Memphis and see that, you know, see that live performer, that indie band, that whatever. And so now I get to through Find Me a Stream.
So I do think, you know, I mentioned at the beginning, I think there is a new normal, and I don't know how long this sheltering in place or the severe restrictions are going to occur, but I think even after that, people are going to be traveling less. I don't see a point for people to get on airplanes and fly to Europe for a 2-day conference for many people. And I also think, you know, the Stanford event shows that you can host something in Palo Alto and bring the world there. And you can still do a live event. I mean, there's nothing to prevent having that live component, but the live stream is, you know, I think an additional revenue opportunity, an additional, you know, learning opportunity, engagement opportunity for a lot of people. So I do think that people are going to be figuring out how to run events in this hybrid manner. I mean, just look at this and look at how much Zoom has just gone through the roof. And, you know, one of the questions I ask myself is, how many Zoom events are going on today that I don't know about? I mean, 1,000, 5,000? I mean, I have no way of even knowing. So, you know, I think that that's a really interesting challenge is if somebody's doing a Zoom event today, I mean, I'm sure there are ones that on business or science that I would love to participate in, or art or music. And, you know, that's going to continue.
Okay, I have some questions for Nathan that are coming from the chat box. Is there anyone that benefits from COVID with regards to live music? And for example, smaller independent artists, that's the first question. Two, with the slew of artists performing on Instagram Live, is there a way you've thought about innovating your business to accommodate and monetize online live performance, probably at the scale and size of the mega artists, not the ones that Michael are talking about? So Nathan, could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the first question is really, who are the winners going to be? And the truth is, like, when you shut your industry down for a year, there aren't a lot of winners except the ones who had enough capital to survive. And so I think, you know, the strong in this industry are going to get stronger. And you've seen just a lot of independent promoters and smaller clubs that are going belly up. And so depending on how you think about the industry, whether that's a good or bad thing, you know, what I alluded to earlier is I also think that creates some openings. The lack of capital and lack of revenue creates some openings for some potential new entrants. But I think you're going to see the strong companies in the space, the ones who have the balance sheet to get through this, ostensibly get even stronger. And then the question around Instagram Live is an interesting one. I mean, you know, on a scalable way, I mean, first of all, it's different. It just is different. It's not the same experience as I talked about earlier, because there's something so social to going there and being there in person. Just not the same thing to be on your couch, although there is certainly a business there, in particular for independent artists. But I think what you're seeing the Taylors, Swifts, and the Coldplays and others do through this period is just keep that connectivity live with their fans, using social to blast out a single, you know, to reach as far as they can. And I think there's a reason why those artists aren't moving to some of the smaller platforms just yet, because I think they see that moment in which they're going to come back out and do the arena tour or the stadium tour. So artists right now, I think, are a little bit hesitant to start charging for those things, because there's an intimacy, there's a recognition that we're at a time socially and economically where that maybe feels like capitalizing on their fan base. This is a lot of the performance that we've seen of late has certainly been, you know, to soothe people, right? And to sort of get them through this period in time. I'm not sure that it's evolved just yet into Taylor Swift being able to say, all right, well, I've got, you know, 50 million Twitter followers. Let me do a Twitter Live where I can take a tip from everybody, or, you know, Instagram introduces new functionality where you can, you know, there's a $5 paywall to join tonight or something. I think you're much more likely in the short run to see some artists do a Netflix special and, you know, see how that works relative to, you know, you saw Taylor do her live concert from Paris that she recorded in the fall. They ran on ABC. That's an example, right, of ways that artists are thinking about monetizing it. I'm not sure that they're ready to use their social channels just yet as a monetization tool, in part because it's really hard to make the economics of that go in this moment.
Great. We have a couple questions for Paraag. First of all, comment, thanks for joining the students, the admits, and I have to say, as an alum, we're really excited to get a chance to meet you and hear from you today. There's curiosity about what it was like to climb the ranks of a professional sports organization. Can you just talk about the arc of your career? And do you have any advice for people who are interested in a professional sports executive career path? That's one question. The other question is more, how does football maintain a race-blind, merit-based community that many other organizations cannot? What can people learn from the fishbowl that professional athletics is in? What can you teach other organizations about doing that?
Those are some heavy questions. You know what? I'm going to tie them together because it is somewhat related. The second one is related to my career, so I do want to talk a little bit about that. One of the sad realities of professional sports is that it's a very insular industry. It's somewhat like Hollywood, or at least what we know about, what I think I know about Hollywood, in that it's a business. To get into it, it's about who you know, not what you know. And it's slowly changed over many decades, but it's still not I hate to admit it, but it's still not a purely merit-based business. You know, when I first got in, this is my 20th year with the 49ers, believe it or not. When I first got in, I was fortunate in that I was a Bain management consultant, and Bill Walsh, the old coach and GM of the 49ers, hired Bain to work on a project on the 2001 draft. And I was the junior kid on the team, and the 49ers didn't pay Bain a whole lot of money, and so no partner was really associated on the project, so I did all the work. And so Coach Walsh and I hit it off, and he asked me to come work full time, and it was really because of that fortuitous turn of events why I even got my chance. And you know, I talk about a sad reality. 20 years ago, I was the only Indian American within a football front office of an NFL team. This was back in 2001. And fast forward 20 years, and I am the only Indian American in a football side front office of an NFL team. And that's not because there's not thousands and if not millions of other qualified people. That's just a sad reality of the sport. And I'm not even mentioning the fact there's no Asian Americans. You know, broader within the football side. You know, we populate jobs within PR or finance or marketing, but not on the team sport side. And that's just a sad reality. And you know, we've tried to change, and even on the business side, it's sort of changed over time. I remember as we went from an organization of 60 or 70 people up to 300 people as we were building and trying to figure out how to find a stadium and build a stadium and sell a stadium. One of the things I did is I hired, I think, around 10 or 12 new VP or C-level people around 2009 to 2011 timeframe to prepare for the stadium. And I remember this was not all that novel of an idea, but I remember thinking to myself, what I'm going to do is look for people who are really strong business people who happen to have sports experience or sports interest. And that was actually turning sports upside down on its head, because previously it was always finding sports people who happen to have a little bit of business. You know, the previous way things have always been done is, hey, if you fail in ticket sales in baseball, then all of a sudden you might become a VP of ticket sales within the NBA. You maybe do a pedestrian job there, but now you have two different sports. You're going to become a chief revenue officer of an NFL team so that you can sell tickets to the NFL. And the only thing that you have is experience and years. It doesn't even matter how good you were. And what we were able to do going through that is we built ourselves a nice competitive advantage, because we hired a lot of people who are very talented in what they do, that, yeah, they know sports. Some of them actually came from sports, but you know what? They're business people first, and understood business. We did actually something similar when we went through our search. One of my owner and I went through our search to find our head coach and our GM. You know, and we found a GM who didn't necessarily have scouting experience, didn't live in Motel 6s scouting colleges for previous 2 decades, but he was long on leadership and long on vision and long on presence. And a lot of the traits that the GSB tries to teach us about leadership is what John Lynch had. And so we took a chance because, again, we were finding qualities and traits first and experience second, because the belief is that you can grow into that. And so as going back to the fishbowl thing, I feel like the NFL and professional sports is still not there. It's still very much an old boys network where you're hiring people who you know. And it's part of the reason why professional sports hasn't advanced as much as the outside world has been, because we haven't needed to. We've been legacy businesses who we've been passed down from ownership generation to ownership generation without necessarily needing to maximize ROI or return. It was just more around, shoot, for lack of a better term, we're billion-dollar lemonade stands. And you know, hopefully that changes over time. And I guess I was just chatting with a really good friend of mine from the GSB recently about this. I guess if I've learned one thing from the events of this past of 2020 is that, you know, I sort of want to use my place in the NFL for the last 2 decades as maybe as a platform to advocate for people that for this business to be a little bit more merit-based and be a meritocracy.
And also, it's really inspiring to hear that the opportunity that you were given by Bill Walsh when you were early in your career, look at how that's flowered, and now you've turned around and did the same thing to others. So the ability for all of us here who are on this call or in our community to be able to looking for young talent and then mentoring them and guiding them and providing them the opportunity to really expand their experience base and learn from the people that have come before them. So that was great to hear. What I'd like to propose is that we do a pause. It's the top of the hour. I'd like to just announce the next session, and then we'll open the mics and let anybody who'd like to ask a question live, ask a question live.